Jesus said, if I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me. So it's not about me being lifted up. It's about Christ being lifted high. If you have someone that is lifting themselves up, don't follow that person. That person should always lift up Christ. Should always give glory to God because he's due glory. I'm not deserving of any glory or any honor. I always like to give a tip to the men, or it's for everybody, but I was mainly speaking to the guys, but women, it applies to you too. I always like to give a little tip to help you with your maybe your marriage or your relationship. About 10 years ago, I'm a man of many questions. Whenever I get in the presence of wisdom, I ask questions. And so there was a guy that was married about 60 long years. And I said, hey, brother, man, I know you've been married for 60 years. How did you do it? And the guy laughed as his eyes had grown dim, the wrinkles in his face, and had a little shimmer in his hands as he couldn't keep them still. And he looked over at this old 1968 Chevy. He said, it's because I bought that Chevy. And I said, what? That got to do with you being married. He said, it's all because of that Chevy right there. He said, this is the same Chevy I bought when I first got married. And he said, and it still runs as if it was new. I'm sitting there all perplexed as a young guy. I said, and? He said, son, let me tell you. He said, when I first got this Chevy, the only thing that was halfway decent on it was the motor. And he said, son, I had to put sweat and tears in rebuilding this vehicle. Hose was in the quarter panel. The seats was tore up. The radio was snatched out. Wires was everywhere. And he said, I had to work on this car day and night. He said, now you look at that car, you would never believe what it was before. And I began to think, I said, and he said, son, it's like this. He said, with my marriage, I had to build my marriage from brick by brick. That's why you see the brick house now. It was because of through sweat and tears, day and night. He said, there's many times on this Chevy truck, I wanted to give up on it. I wanted to quit. And he said, but I made a commitment. And he said, I only had $100 when I bought this thing. That was my last dime, so I couldn't give up on it. That's all I had. And he said, son, in order to have a great marriage, it's about not giving up and be willing to be committed to the very thing that you put your hand to. He said, Jesus said, any man that put his hand to the plow and look back is not fit for the kingdom of heaven. So I would like for you guys to take that with you this morning. If you turn in your Bible, we're going to be beginning in John chapter 8. We studied this in a Bible class a couple months ago. If you have your Bibles, turn to John chapter 8. And we're going to also, for those that after today is going to be very committed in reading the Word of God, I'm going to give you some tips on how to read the Word of God. Because God don't want you to come to him any kind of way. Oftentimes when I was younger, a young lad, I wish my aunt is on the way here, is her dad that taught me, which is my grandfather. He said, sonny boy, whenever you read the Word of God, you should never read it sitting down. And you should never read it silently. And little did I know when I began to do research, rabbis would not allow their students to sit down to read any literature that was important, or would never allow them to read it silently. And that could be true in the Bible, because the Bible says in Revelation, blessed are those who read and hear the Word of God. So in other words, that it's a great benefit when you read it aloud. You're able to hear yourself read. And also, when you read the Word of God, read it slowly. I know we live in a fast food restaurant. We want to rush everything. But let me take the time to interject that you don't want to rush your experience with God, because God didn't rush you. As I go to the school at Haley School, as I talk to the kids and read to them, one thing I will begin to say to them that the scripture says, thus says the Lord, that you were beautifully and wonderfully made by your Creator. And in other words, God took time to make every inch of your body in the womb. He took time to draw you, and every little thing that you think is wrong with you is right. And God said it has a purpose. There's a reason why you look this way or look that way. There's a reason why you have a curve like this and a curve like that. Because God said, I have made you for a specific reason. So don't rush through with God. Take your time with him. Enjoy it. You know, a lot of times we take our time with things that we want to take our time with. Oh man, I tell you, when I get ready to tell the kids to clean up, they can walk slow. They drag their feet. With God, we want to take our time with God because we don't want to miss anything that God has for us. Because what God has for us is very powerful. Another thing, read the Word of God. If you're reading the Psalms, read it in its entirety. In other words, like when you have a thought, you want to complete the whole thought. It's good if you can read the whole book. But I know we live busy lives and we can't finish a whole book. But try to read things in their full context. You have a great appreciation, a better understanding of it. And also, when you read the Word of God, take a dictionary with you. If you find words that you do not know, look them up. You don't even got to have a strong concordance or a fine biblical Greek concordance. Just take a Webster dictionary, which is only 99-cent dictionary, and look up the word that you do not know. You know, the Bible, I was reading in the Psalm and the word so, S-O. You know, I said, I'm going to look that word up. And a part of that meaning means in that way. So when I came to the Psalm and it said, so David worshiped the Lord, you know, it adds a deeper meaning because it means that when you go back and read the Psalm in that context, he had a lot of conflict. This is when Saul was trying to kill him. And it says, so David worshiped the Lord in the midst of his trials. In other words, that means that Saul indicated that this is the way David had always been worshiping. It's not then. A lot of times think so means then. But in this context, it means in that way. So in other words, that when David came to a problem, that means that he worshiped God the way he always been worshiping. Didn't matter whether he was on the valley or on the mountaintop, whether it was good or whether it was bad. He worshiped God in the same way every time. So that adds meaning and value to me. When things arise, how do I worship God? Do it change? For David, it did not change. He worshiped God in that way. So those are just a few tips. And when you begin a serious reading of the Word of God, you're going to see some things that change in your life. John chapter 8. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Now, early in the morning, he came again into the temple, and all the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. Then the scribes and Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said to him, Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what do you say? Then they said, testing him, and they might have something of which to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger, as though he did not hear. Verse 7. So when they continued asking him, he raised himself up and said to them, He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. Verse 9. And those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one, beginning with the oldest even to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and a woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had raised himself up and saw no one but the woman, he said to her, Woman, where are thou accusers of yours? Have no one condemned you? She said, No one, Lord. And Jesus said to her, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. Man, that passage is so powerful. As we get ready to break this passage down, brick by brick, you're going to find some very encouraging things for you guys to take with you. Very first verse, you find a conjunction. You find the word but. In order to appreciate the but in the text, you have to go back to the previous verse. In the last verse of chapter 7, it says, and everyone went to his own house. The conjunction but means that the sentence is going to be flowing in one direction, but the but is going to send it into another direction. So when your but goes one way, God got a bigger but for you. So in other words, you find here that the people went to their house, but where did Jesus go? He went to the mountain. Now, why did the Bible point out that Jesus went to the mountain, but the people went to their houses? It's very important for you to understand something. In the Bible, mountains is symbolic. It's very important that you understand some things about mountains. And as I begin to do my research on mountains in the Bible, it's very unique to me. A lot of things that I found in the Bible about mountains. We read in Genesis chapter 22 with Isaac. Isaac was to be offered on a mountain. Moses came to the mountain of God with the burning bush. When God presented himself to Moses, it was on a mountain. Later on, we're going to find that the mountain was called Mount Sinai. That means that God gave the law to Moses on a mountain. And I want you to notice that when Moses went to the mountain of God, it was only him and God. You're going to find that when people go to the mountain, a lot of times they're in solitude. You're isolated. In other words, the mountain represented that you're a desolated place with God. Oh man, I can't tell you, when I went to Vegas back here in May, the end of May, beginning of June, man, they had these big old mountains in the horizon. And my spirit jumped within me. And I told my wife, I said, we gotta go to these mountains. My wife said, I ain't trying to go to no mountain. I'm trying to enjoy the scenery here. I'm trying to go to there. I said, I got to go. And I tell you, I understand why not many people are mentioned to be on a mountain, because the hike is rough. You get tired when you're going up on the mountain. It's rough. The terrain is rough. The air is thinner. But when you get there on that mountain, you have a whole different viewpoint. Your perspective has been changed. See, when you look in the garbage all your life, you miss all the beautiful things that God has around for us. When I was on top of the mountain, I could see above the trees. I could see it's as if I was touching the clouds. And I began to see how marvelous God's creation was on the mountain. In other words, we get a different viewpoint of God when we go on a mountain. Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. The pattern was given to him on the mountain. Aaron, the high priest, died on the mountain. In Isaiah chapter 2, the Bible said and prophesied that the church shall be established on top of the mountain, on top of the hill in Isaiah 2. And we know that it came to pass at Jerusalem. If you know anything about Jerusalem, Jerusalem was set up on a hill, a high city in Jerusalem. So in Acts 2, they was told to stay and abide in Jerusalem. The apostle and the Holy Spirit were following them, and they began to preach and teach in Acts 2. And many people were added to the church, those that were being saved. Where was it at? It was on top of a mountain. Mountains is very important in the Bible. And we're going to have some mountains. But what we're going to find is that anytime that you have a mountain, signified as a valley. Verse 2. when Jesus went to the mountain, was to prepare him from something. And this is where we're going to get our first point here this morning. We're going to have 5 points, and we're going to run through it quickly. It's the commission, the concern, the condemnation, the compassion, and the command. So now we find the commission here. But Jesus needs to prepare himself for the work at hand. That means how to evangelize people. The Bible said after he came down from the mountain, which he got himself together with God first. That means that he had a good connection. He wanted to make sure his pipeline to God was intact. That means that I need to make sure that myself is right before I go to preach and teach to the people. In other words, what Jesus said, God, help me and build me and strengthen me, mold me, get this engine right. I need for you to change my spark plugs. I need for you to put some things in me, tune me up like I need to be tuned up. Jesus went to the mountains to get strength from the Lord to do what? Verse 2. Now early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. You know, the word commission means to bring into working condition. I said, man, I never knew what the word commission means. I always thought about it as in a salesman sense, as you receive a commission. But the way the Bible defines it in this text, it means to bring into working condition an instruction or command or a duty given to a person or a group of people. You see what Jesus is doing? He's going to the temple to get people in working condition. We are all filthy rags. We're all is working improperly. So therefore, that's why we needed Jesus to help us with this. And what did he do? Notice this. I want you to notice Jesus, the King of the world. He was high on a mountain, and he went low down into the valley where men were. And what did he do? He sat down among the people. Now, let me tell you something. Any king, any president, any high official would never come and sit among you because you know one great. But Jesus is the only one that will sit with you even when you're dirty, even when you're a nobody, even when people despise you, even when people call you names. Jesus would come and sit with you. That is powerful. That Jesus would come and sit with me in the midst of my filth, in the midst of my imperfection, in the midst of my trials. He will come and sit in the midst. Oh man, the commission. A lot of times we want to preach to people, but we don't ever want to sit with them. We don't want to go in the midst of them. We always look at people, oh, they look too bad. They smell too bad. Oh, man, what is it going to look like for my image to associate with these people or that people? But Jesus didn't care. In John chapter 4 and verse 4, we find that the scripture says that Jesus needed to go through Samaria after leaving Galilee and Judea. And the disciples said, wait a minute, Jesus, this ain't where we're supposed to go. We got some high official people that we need to meet. We need to get you to the high place. Jesus said, wait a minute. I need to go to Samaria because there's a woman down there that needs me. And we know this woman by the woman at the well. And we see that this woman went to the well at the highest point of the day, signified that she probably was cast out among the people. Meaning nobody wanted to be around her. Nobody wanted to associate with her. Nobody wanted to be involved with her. And so she had to go when nobody else went to the well. And people seen her, they would want to run away from her. Oh, we don't want to be around her. But Jesus said, even though the world neglect her, I got something for her. The Bible said he went to the well and he told her something. He said, if you drink of me, you would never thirst again. And man, when Jesus gave her that word, she went back to the city not caring what people said. She began to tell everybody, and granted, she had about 6 or 7 husbands. So in that time, to have that many people, they would call you loose. You look loose around here. Or they would call you a harlot. So, in other words, her reputation for to have multiple men was very high. In my grandfather's day, she would say this woman got high mileage. And if you want to be honest, nobody want to call with a lot of miles on them. Same way with women. So in other words, when she reached a high mileage level, nobody wanted her. Her value had been diminished. Why? Because she had messed up her life with bad decisions. Even in the midst of bad decisions, God came to her. Man, thank you, Lord. And we find that God not only did this with her, but he did it with you and I. And this speaks to the meekness and the lowliness of God, that he's willing to be among us. Now let us traverse to the concern in verse 3. Then, that's when you know the story is about to get good when it say the word then. It just seemed like every time you read the nice book, and when it say then, that's when the story is about to really, and they say, get popular. The Bible says, then the scribes and Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery. And when they had set her in his midst, now, I want you to think about this. Sometimes we don't really visualize. That's why I said read the Bible slowly and aloud. Because I want you to think about what Jesus was doing. He was in an assembly like this. He was in a temple. And he was just sitting down and talking to people like this. And he was saying, yeah, this is what the word of God said. This is what I have come to do. And somebody would come busting through the door and saying, wait a minute, we got something. Now, here is God teaching people, and he's now interrupted by scribes and Pharisees. How disobedient. How arrogant could they be? Now, I want you to notice something with Jesus. I love how he handled this. But you have someone with all authority. You have someone that have created the world. You have someone that can command your spirit to come to him. You drop dead right then. He has that power, but he allowed us to be disobedient and arrogant in his midst. And sometimes when someone disrespects me, I want to retaliate. But Jesus didn't. This is how you evangelize the world. See, when they attack me, I need to be like Jesus. See, I can give the Pharisees a little credit. At least they had a concern. They had a concern about this woman being an adulterer, because the law says that if you caught in the act, you're supposed to be stoned. So they had a concern for the right thing and for that woman, but it's amazing how we can be concerned for others and not ourselves. It's easy to look at someone else's life and miss the beam in your own life. We're going to analyze the text a little bit more. Let us read. Verse 4, interrupted Jesus while he was talking. They said to him, teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act. Now, my question to it, since I know what the Levitical writer in Deuteronomy said, that if someone is caught, it says that both should be brought and stoned. My question is, where was the man? See, now you begin to see the intent. Their concerns really wasn't a concern for her. Notice this. They said, we caught her in the very act. Committing adultery. Now I want you to think about this. If this is true, what they said, then you know what the scene would have looked like? They would have brought a naked woman in the midst of the temple. If she was caught in the very act, she would have had time to put on her clothes, because that's not how they did it. Soon as they caught you, they would have grabbed you wrong you out, to bring shame and humiliation among you. So I want you to see the text. This is a woman that is naked before many people. She would have been embarrassed. And I want you to see what Jesus do. I want you to think about what Jesus said, for I am meek and lowly in heart. I want you to see how Jesus deals with this. The Bible reads, and we find in verse 5 is a condemnation. Verse 5. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what do you say? So in other words, their judgment was this woman should be killed. So that was ready. And if you read in another gospel, it would say that they had stones in their hands. So that was ready for her to meet her judgment. Verse 6. This they said, testing him that they might have something which to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger, though he did not hear. Now, I want you to think about this. Why did Jesus stoop down? I believe that the reason why Jesus stooped down was to take the attention off of the woman, which was naked, and placed it on himself. I can't tell you how many times that you guys look at me and say, oh, look how great Isaac is. Look how great things he has done. Look what he has acquired. But actually, it's not me. It is Christ that have allowed me, that have made you look at me in a different light because Christ lived through me. And so Christ kneeled down and bring all the focus on him, because when he began to stoop down and begin to write, people like, what's now all the focus is on Jesus. Now, like, what is he doing? And he didn't say nothing. I want you to think about this. Now, Jesus had just been interrupted. They brought a naked woman into his midst, interrupted his teaching, and he doesn't say anything. Man, this is powerful. Jesus, may I suggest before we get to the next verse, that Jesus not only was there for the woman and for the people in the temple, but he was there for the scribes and Pharisees. Because the Bible says, a soft answer turn away wrath. And Jesus, the way Jesus is moving is that he's trying to save everybody. And he wants to save all of us from the shame and the embarrassment. He could have easily made the Pharisees look like fools, but he didn't do that. He could have easily made the woman look like a fool. He didn't do that. But notice what he did do. He brings all the attention on himself. I want you to think about this. At the cross, what did Jesus do for us? He brought all the guilt, all the shame, all the agony and pain, the life of death, the sting of death. On the cross, he took it away. And he bare the gift in his body on a tree. That's what he did for us. He bore the shame on our behalf. That's why we should serve him all the more. Let's go to the next verse, which we're going to look at the compassion. Verse 8. Verse 7, I'm sorry. So when they continue asking him, he raised himself up and said to them, he who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. And again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. Well, I tell you, now this is how you evangelize. For those who want to know how to teach people, give them God's word and just get out the way. See what Jesus did, he had a missile that was loaded and ready for the hearts of these people. And what he did, he loaded the missile, gave him the charge, and he ducked and got out of the way. You don't believe it? Watch the text. You don't believe that it worked? See, when he stooped down in this text, it says, verse 9, then those who heard it being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one. They left. What made them leave? The word of God. Truth made them leave. Beginning with the oldest, even to the last, and Jesus left alone, and a woman standing in the midst. I want you to think about this. We see now in verse 7 the compassion. The compassion of Jesus. Because Jesus said, he who without sin cast the first stone. What does that mean, preacher? That means that Jesus could have picked up a stone and threw it at the woman. But why didn't Jesus throw a stone at the woman? Because Jesus said, I did not come to destroy the world, but that the world might, through me, be saved. Jesus did not come to try to destroy us. He came to save us. And what he did was, if this woman wants to be saved, she will receive my word. And we're going to get to the command. We're almost at the last point. We're going to find that Jesus is left alone. I want you to appreciate this point. That the Pharisees and the scribes meant to hurt this woman. And they were trying to kill this woman. She had a death sentence. They were just doing a formality thing to see what Jesus was going to say. But they was ready to kill this woman. But little did they know, they brought her to the wrong place. Because she did not receive death, but she received life. There's time that you may condemn and be discouraged about your enemies. Don't be. Because a lot of times your enemy brings you closer to God than anybody would ever bring you. A lot of times you think your family is one that brings you to God, but actually could be your enemy. This woman enemy brought her to Jesus. And this woman's life was saved because of the scribes and Pharisees. Go figure. That the scribes and Pharisees saved a woman's life by bringing them to Jesus. When their plan had, that's why I said, when you got one butt, God got a bigger butt. See, you got one plan, but God said, no, I'm going to take this plan and send it another way. Now we're about to get deep into something. Jesus dealt with the enemy and gave them a word. The word of God convicts us. That's what he said. It said when they heard this, what did they hear? The words of Jesus. The words of God. The words of God convicts people. It causes something, a level of conviction. It gets to the place where no one can go. Give people the word of God and get out the way. Now Jesus is left alone with the woman that's naked, that's ashamed. What is her response? What did Jesus say to her? Jesus asked her a question. Where are your accusers? And she said, they have left. He said, no one condemned you? She said, no. Notice what Jesus said. Neither do I. Here's the command. Go and sin no more. See, a lot of times people want the promises of God and violate the principles of God. I don't think you got that. A lot of times we want the promises of God but violate the principle. See, the principle is go and sin no more. The promise is you'll have heaven. But it's predicated on you not going and sinning. See, she was saved. But in order to keep her salvation, she had to go and sin no more. Isn't that a wonderful thing? That what she did previously didn't matter now. It's what you do next that makes all the difference in the world. So a lot of times we got choices to make. Don't worry about yesterday's choices. Worry about the next choice. As we wrap up, I would like for you to think about Jesus' path before now. Before Jesus met this adulterous woman, he announced in John 1 that the word became flesh and dwelt among men. You find in John chapter 2, we find the first miracle ever recorded that Jesus turned water into wine. We find in chapter 3 that Jesus said, if I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me. We find and also Nicodemus came to him by night. We find in John chapter 4 that Jesus met a woman at the well and said that I am the living water. Then we find in John chapter 5 that he goes on to heal a lame man that was lame by the pool. We find in John chapter 6, he was called the bread of life. He said, if you eat of me, you will never hunger again. If you drink of me, you will never thirst again. So he came and teaching. You find that he fed the 5,000. And we find that in John chapter 7 that he healed a girl. And you find John 8, he saved a woman's life. May I suggest to you that the reason why God, Jesus, healed people had a greater purpose spiritually. The Bible records that Jesus healed a blind man. But why? The Bible said Jesus told a man to take up his bed and walk that was lame for 38 long years. Why? The Bible said that a man could not even speak. He was mute, and God gave him speech. Why? The Bible records that Lazarus was dead, suffering in his grave, decaying in his grave. Why did God raise him up? Here's your message for this morning. There are some of us that are blind spiritually and need to see. There are some of us deaf spiritually and need to see, and need to hear. There are some of us that can't even walk right in this life, and we need the strength. We're lame, and we need to be able to walk. There's some of us that are dead in our sins and need to be alive again. So in other words, the reason why God did those miracles was to give us hope. Because if God healed this person, he'll do it for me. That's the message. You can come to Christ. I know a lot of times we designate this time, and I don't like that. You know the reason why? Because it seems like this is the only time you can come to Christ. You can come to Christ any day of the week, any minute of the day. If you want to come to Christ at 2 o'clock today, and we're not even assembled here, call someone and come to him. If you want to come at 12 o'clock at midnight, go to him. It doesn't matter when, it doesn't matter where you're at. The only thing that matters is that you go to Christ. If he did it for them, he'll do it for you. Let us stand and sing our invitation song.
Have you been to Jesus for a cleansing power? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you fully trusted in his gracious arm? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you washed in the blood, in the soul? In the soul cleansing May be seated. Are there any prayer requests at this time? Any prayer requests? We appreciate Brother Isaac stepping in for our faith. We hope the message that delivered for us today, that we may take these things and apply it to our everyday lives. Are there any prayer requests at this time? If not, let's go to our Heavenly Father. Our Heavenly Father, we approach our throne of mercy once again, as humble as we know how, thanking thee for all the blessings that you stored upon us. Most of all, Heavenly Father, we're thankful for our Son who sent down this earth, who suffered and died, so that we may have to the right to free of life. Heavenly Father, at this time, we also petition thee for those who may be sick in our number. Continue to bless them and heal them, their condition, and meet our will, and return them to a reasonable course of their health. And Heavenly Father, also at this time, we continue to pray for our travelers, those who may be traveling the highways and byways. And Heavenly Father, we also send out a special prayer for Brother Page as he's traveled in Houston. Bless him and watch over and protect him, that he may once again return back to his fold in good health. And Heavenly Father, we continue to pray also for the message that was delivered. And we pray that the message that was delivered, that we take these things and apply it to our everyday life. And Heavenly Father, these things we ask in your name. In Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Are there any prayer requests at this